Okay, so we're live. So everybody,
Be at your best behavior.
right? Okay. Um, I will share the our milestone for the agenda. Let me just I've just lost my other screens. Hold on, let me get them back. Where are we? Don't need that guy. Here we go. Milestone 10. Share that. Let's pause that guy. Okay, now I'm trying to find where my actual Zoom thingy went. Okay, there we go. So share screen. This guy. Okay, so here's our milestones. We can walk through. So blog to coincide with 6 and 8 backport. Arunish and I did get together to discuss that. We have a plan to get together in another, I think, like not this Monday, but the Monday after.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping to start to write a little bit of that today. So I think we're on track for that. Anything to Arunish to add on that one?
No, I think yeah, we are. We discussed an outline of a blog. We're working with Mark, who was working at TDD, has worked on a new native logger that is built on top of an API. We are hoping to kind of showcase, talk about that in the blog as well. So, and that's like super performant. Somehow, I mean, not somehow, it's native, so it is going to be performant. But it is an idea that we're going to talk about, saying that some of these things were not possible in the past because of the maintenance burden required to support all the different versions. And here's an example of somebody did a NAPI based logger.
Along with it being like performance was no issue because we can, easily get the performance out of it that we needed.
Right.
Okay. I guess the next issue then is creating the workshop for Node Summit. I know, Jim, you have a first cut. I'll let you talk about that. You're on mute there.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, I posted 2 tutorials on the issue and received feedback from Nicola concerning adding additional information about asynchronous work. So that's something I'd like to look at, and I'm open to any suggestions you guys have for improving those 2 tutorials.
Can we walk through the tutorial? I saw this come in, but didn't get a chance to.
Okay. So yeah. So what I'm assuming here is that the person has experience with C and C++, but maybe not with Node, particularly building native add-ons. So I do list the prerequisites and the tools. So if you're starting like from ground zero, you should be able to work through the tutorial.
So is this kind of a brand new, you want to write a native module, here's how you do it?
Yeah, well, it uses the generator N-API module to generate just a bare bones project. So it kind of gets you oriented to, okay, how would you, this would be one way to start a project. And by the time you're done, you actually have an operational module. So then the idea is that you could adapt that or, add additional code to this one.
Right. That's pretty cool.
Right. So it's good. You got here's the baseline stuff. Okay. Anyway, I'll let you keep walking through it. Just tell me if you want me to scroll up and down.
Okay. Yeah. So it has you download the Yeoman and then the generator module, and then it just takes you through step by step generating the project. And then once the project is generated, right here it shows you it shows you how the project is laid out when it's generated, and then it takes you through each of the files that are generated and explains what the purpose of the file is and what the contents of those files are.
Right.
Okay, so this up to here, so okay, but no, the generator actually generates you some template things you can fill in even, right?
Correct.
So that's good.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then it describes what, basically how the code is working.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. So basically, what does that module do?
It shows you how to create an object, JavaScript object, and call methods on that JavaScript object. Is essentially what it's doing.
I just noticed one thing in the tutorial, the migration tutorial. You're using std : toString. That may not work for people using OS 10, because I know that's an issue. For some reason, the standard template library over there is deficient somehow.
Okay.
So you might want to just use a str error. That's like that's in the standard C library, and it converts the Erno number to a string, and then you can
okay.
the string.
Is that the other one here? Or?
Yeah, that's the other. That's
okay.
So this one we were looking at gets you oriented to creating an API module.
Yep.
And then the other is the migration.
Okay,
so,
right.
So this one, I did a survey of modules that were out there, and this one called MicroTime seemed to be just the right size for what we wanted to do. I looked at other modules to convert, and that I was getting bogged down in additional complexities that were beyond the N-API concerns. So this is a really good one, because the conversion tool runs, and then you try to build it and it fails, and it fails in ways that are very common to what people are going to run into when they try to convert a module.
Mm-hmm.
So so what I have them do is clone the project, and the first thing I have them do is build and run the project the way it is to verify, okay, this is how it's supposed to work. And then I have them run the conversion tool and then try to build again. And then what you have is a series of issues that need to be corrected. And so I list each issue that you're going to run into, describe why you're having it, and then what you need to do to fix it.
Wow, excellent.
Yeah.
So then by the time you've addressed all of the issues, then you can build and run it, and you'll get the same results you were getting before you did the conversion. So when you're done, you've actually converted this little module to N-API.
That's excellent, because it also, like you said, it sounds like it's the right size, and that there's like 4 or 5 things to fix up, but it's not overwhelming.
Right, exactly. And it kind of gives you an idea, okay, of what the process is, and then the sort of issues that you're going to run into. And then down at the bottom, I link to our documentation saying, okay, when other issues come up, here are some really good resources you can use to help understand what you need to do for your particular needs.
That's great.
These two seem like a really good start. I'm wondering what like certainly sort of an advanced one, I think, is definitely around the async workers.
Yeah, I like that. I like Nicola's suggestion on that. So yeah, I would like to do one on that.
And I think my other thinking is like, sort of the migration is sort of like a separate topic, almost like, here's migration. In terms of the sort of creating your own module, I can see the first one you have is a really good, like, I would almost call it sometimes it's like exercise 1, right?
Right.
And then, I can see exercise N being the async one where it's probably the most complex, complicated.
Yeah.
In between, I could see a few which are, and I don't know them off the top of my head, but if we looked at the API, it would be like teaching you a little bit more about this particular part of the API, right? Like you basically got up something, you've got the hello world up front, and then is there something else that's, maybe not as obvious when you look at the different classes, like, working with the object type or the, something like, so I could see maybe 2 or 3 other ones in between there, and then that would sort of round out the whole thing.
Yeah, so I can add those as special topics. So there could be one on async, on objects, on promises.
Right, yeah, promises are a good one. So that's just my suggestion. I'll maybe look through the APIs and say, well, which other ones look particularly interesting, and 2 to 3 other ones to fit in there would give you sort of the, some people may take the whole time just to get through the first 2 you already have. Some people who are sort of more advanced would then have some others to go through. And
good. I like that idea, Michael.
But yeah, I haven't had time to read through them either, but just glancing at them, they look really well put together. So
this is amazing. This is it is very pleasing to the eye as well.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll definitely find the time to go through and give you some more detailed feedback. But yeah, I like what I see so
question.
far.
Should we kind of in the migration part link to that document we have, like how to publish it side by side your N-API and a regular module?
The tag.
Yeah, if you can give me that URL, I'll put it in there.
Yeah, Gabriel actually.
Yeah, it's one of the issues on, I think, ABI stable Node or Node.js N-API. I forget.
No, I'll send that link out.
Okay.
Because that would be kind of another thing. Somebody's migrating, and they want to deal with both the versions of their module.
Yep. Okay, good.
Kind of, Gabriel did a lot of work to get straighten that out.
Okay, good.
Yeah, no, this is great. I think it'll be good. It'll be great for the conference, but also just great in terms of something to publicize in terms of a resource.
That's exactly what my point was. Like once we feel comfortable about this, we should tweet and certainly link through the blog as well.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. We can figure out the timing, but certainly once we've gone through it once at the conference, I think we should be ready to say we've got feedback there. But even maybe before that, we can jump into that.
Yeah, good.
Okay, so yeah, no, that's great to see.
Great.
Yeah, so Nicola just posted the link.
Okay.
So, this is the link.
Oh, perfect. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, and I found that comment that I made about using like a tag. So there's that one too.
Okay, thank you.
And I'd kind of throw it to anybody else if anybody else has some specific ideas of what you think would be interesting to cover in like an exercise, throw them Jim's way.
Yeah, you can just throw them on this issue.
Sounds good.
So this is the same thing, right? I mean, the comment part, Gabriel. This is
is that where it got published in the end? Okay, never mind then.
That's exactly what I just took in.
Oh, okay. Wow, I didn't realize it got published like that.
Yeah, at the time you were busy, so I just published on your behalf.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else, Jim, on that front?
No.
Okay. Now, why is this? That was part of this. Wasn't this part of this list before? Yeah. Okay. Anyway, I don't know what happened there. Okay. So workshop document guidance on adding APIs to an API. I think Hitesh, you were going to do a first cut.
Hitesh can't make it today, but I have I have a gist that has basically what his rough proposals are. He's not ready. He wanted to get some feedback from this forum before he published them. So I shared. Oh, sorry, I shared it to just Gabriel because I am learning how Zoom works. Here we go.
Yeah, I might even have to stop sharing to see that.
Well, I shared it in the chat.
Well, that's what I mean. The chat isn't okay. There, okay. Now I got the chat
shows up on the bottom.
Yeah, except once I shared my screen, it gives me a totally different view. Now I've got the chat open though. So thanks.
If you want to bring up that link, might just be easier than.
Yeah, you want me to share that instead?
Yeah, if you can just pull that page up. That'd be good.
I got it here. So is it this one? I think. Okay.
So yeah, like I said, this is a kind of a rough cut. I don't think there's too much controversial here. Like the top bullet point is basically defining what a N-API API is. It's nice. Like that was a link. That's a YouTube presentation. I haven't actually watched it, but I haven't watched it myself. But Hitesh had linked it in the original one. The one thing to call out is I think it would be worthwhile, the third bullet point from the bottom, having simultaneous implementation in Node Chakra Core I think that would help strengthen N-API, like that new implementations won't create a situation where, it's on an engine specific thing or feature. I think a lot of these things are already happening today. It's just more about codifying them.
I think writing that down specifically, because certainly when we developed in the beginning, that was always one of the things we wanted to make sure it could be. Now, what I might say is instead of saying Node Chakra Core, I would say in two implementations.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
And maybe a comment that says something like, the Chakra Core team is available to help do the Chakra one, because that's the most likely one. But the requirement itself is that there be two. And
sure, this is really rough cut, but yeah, I'll take that note.
But yeah, no, I'd be heavily in favor of that, because we don't want to get into the state where like we've landed something and then it's impossible to do, right? So
when we were designing an API, still I always did that. I made sure that it was able to be done on Chakra Core, and it has informed both implementation and design decisions for an API. So definitely we should definitely carry that forward.
This was one of the exit criteria anyway, so we need to kind of stick to it.
Yep.
Yeah, and then so let's see. Ideally, it should be discussed at a meeting. Like I tend to just miss PRs occasionally, so like it'd be good to have just a call out of any new APIs that are going to land at the meetings, especially if the person who's working on it can jump in. I know that there's the Promise APIs. I don't know what the state of those were. Did they land or not? I don't believe they did.
No, not yet.
No. No, I mean, I agree that would be nice. I think we may need to ask for, like, we'll need the core projects agreement to a couple of these things.
Okay.
Right, because normally it would just be like, okay, here's something new, enough people approve, it lands, right?
Yeah, and I mean that is a should as well. It's more about just making sure that people get visibility, not a blocker by any means.
Right. So maybe it's a matter of asking that it be tagged in a particular way. Like ask for a new N-API tag or something, and then in our weekly meeting,
actually we can cover that with
list.
We can cover that with two existing tags. If we have N-API and Semver minor, chances are it's a new N-API.
Okay. Yeah. That's true.
So then we would need in this meeting to make sure that we have on our agenda, run that query, see what's there, and talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay. That's.
Let me make sure my PR has those tags.
Yeah. The experimental one is, I'm not quite sure. A new API must be considered experimental for at least one minor release of Node.js before considering promotion of experimental. Like, I don't know how we manage that.
That's a good, and I think that was one of the ones Hitesh didn't really know how we would enforce or like manage that sort of thing. I think his concern was that like we don't want a new API to be like we want some amount of time where we are able to modify the API before it becomes set in stone in cases like where we forget to add a finalize callback, for instance.
Sure.
If we could find that within like one Semver minor release, then we kind of reserve the right to break it, is what he was trying to get at, I think.
Right. So the only way I can think, I'm just brainstorming ideas, like if we had some sort of command line flag or some sort of build flag that was like enable experimental.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
That might be a way to manage this. That basically, like when you add it, initially it basically has to be flagged so that unless you take some action, you can't use it.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to the N-API version proposal of it goes in an if-def of N-API enable experimental, and then it graduates into an actual version once it comes out of experimental.
So here's another thing, right? The experimental flagging has been kind of troublesome in the past. Would it be more easier that we just deal with the experimental thing just through documentation and say, well, this is considered experimental. If you take dependency, you will break. I mean, do we really want to have so much handholding?
I guess the thing is that we're like, these are for new functions, right?
No, I mean, that's what I'm saying as well, that people will, the reason we wanting to be careful is that, okay, you have an API, new API, let's see if there's good adoption of it, people are using it, and if
it needs to be broken for it to be better.
Yeah. So we will create additional friction in people trying it out and giving us timely feedback.
Right, but I guess I'm worried that as you ramp up in numbers, most people won't even read the docs or notice that it's experimental. They'll just use it, and if we break them, they'll be like, "What?" Right? And it's so for the most of the people, like, so there's this new method, and if people really care about it, they're the ones who might be willing to turn it on. And if they don't care enough about it, then maybe they're not going to be the people who will give us feedback anyway, right?
I mean, we have seen our own story, which has been kind of challenging, right?
But it's the we're talking about something different here. Like in that case, it's you need to put a flag on to use anything, right? Most people, you just don't need to use the latest new thing that was added.
Yeah, that's the idea, is that it almost would make the versioning story a little bit more explicit too. Like moving something, all new APIs would go under the experimental header, and then there would be an explicit PR that moves an API to a specific version of N-API for the next release.
And that would actually make managing those versions much easier, because what we have right now is a bit of a, you land something, but then you've got to like, well, is it going to go out in the next minor, and do we have to assign a version?
Exactly.
Whereas if we actually had we've a bunch of these, they've just landed as experimental. Nobody can really use them unless they take an action. Now we're going to promote a bunch of them so they're visible. Let's do that. You're right. I mean, do that along with a thing that bumps the version. That actually makes our life easier, I think.
And we can pick and choose which ones we promote. That's another important thing.
Yeah. Yeah, because right now I even need to go back. My PR needs to be fixed again because I think a couple more N-API APIs landed, so I need to wrangle them down into the version corral.
So I definitely like the idea from that perspective of.
So then we will have to build that infrastructure in N-API. or
it's pretty. If it follows the pattern of the N-API version thing, it would be as simple as doing pound define enable N-API experimental 1 or something. Like just defining N-API enable experimental would just allow those APIs to be visible. Like Node would just have them always in the symbols. It's just the header file would hide them from you unless you asked for them, is the thinking. There's very little infrastructure, actually.
Actually, yeah, with your PR, Kyle, it could be as simple as, like defining N-API version as 99999, and then 5,000 years from now, then then that will break.
Yeah, we could have a define which is N-API experimental. That's that highest number.
Exactly. Yeah. Like we could go to like max safe integer or whatever.
Yeah. I can take a look at that as part of that PR as well.
So this infrastructure has to be, ported all the way back to 6.
Yes, but in the same argument, any new functions would have to be ported back for it to matter, right?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, we could say that version 6 supports an API up to version X, and then if you want to use features beyond that, you cannot use them on Node 6.
Well, no, I guess, but my point is that like we're going to have to do a backport of something, and including this in that something is probably not that much.
Well, actually, if we turn this argument around, then we can say that our decisions as to which new APIs we take out of experimental will be heavily influenced by whether we can backport them or not, because we want the highest possible N-API version to be available as widely as possible, right? But if that's not possible, because we see V8 simply lacks certain features in version 6 or whatever the oldest version becomes, then we still have to take them out of experimental, but then this informs our decision.
Yeah, I still think we're going to get stuck at some point where there's like one that we want is out of experimental in 10, but it just can't be backported to 6.
Oh, definitely. Yes.
We will get to a point where we can no longer bump the version in 6.
It's true. And you know what? That also it kind of impedes us, because what if after that we run one which we could backport, but now we're stuck because in order to backport the one which we could, we'd have to backport the previous one which we can't, and so therefore we can no longer backport anything ever again.
Well, I guess my thought on that was we could still backport functions, but it's just that you can't use the versioning potentially to know that, right? Like you then have to have enough knowledge of saying, okay, well, I know this one was actually backported to 6 and I can use it, as opposed to being able to check the version number.
Right.
And I don't see an easy way around that, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, short of just basically, having an exhaustive list all the time.
Yeah. It's either sort of like we don't, so, eventually 6 would get to the point, well, it supports up to 6 and that's it. But there are then some individual, functions that we backported specifically, specially, and that's all there is to it.
Yeah, I think it depends heavily on the velocity of these APIs too, right? I mean, 6, as far as I know, is in maintenance mode now, right? So there is very little chance we'll be able to backport anything, right? Because
we have a bit, I think we have a little bit more of a flexibility for N-API, because we are, there's a recognition that making sure that people can go back to 6 is important.
Right.
But, realistically, we're now down to 10 months of 6 lifetime, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's another thing. Yeah.
In the next few months, I think we will get more latitude than we would normally to backport things, as long as we do the work and everything to get them back into 6. But 6 months from now, it's sort of like, well, there's only 4 months left.
What's the point?
Really important to do that, or is it that people should be moving off now anyway, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's a good suggestion, because just in terms of version management, that would help significantly as well. Mm-hmm. And it does allow us to land things and for people to use things. So we're not like being a blocker in the way completely, but it does give us a little bit more time to be able to then review those before they get pulled out of experimental.
Right. Yeah. Get some.
So basically, number define, N-API version space, N-API experimental, number include node API.h would be that flag, which will give you everything, including the experimental stuff, right?
Yeah, that would be the thought.
Yeah, that's good.
I think that, and then it's like we can almost then back off on the one of the us reviewing those things. In that, if we give the N-API team the responsibility for taking them out of experimental, I don't know. I still think that's a good, maybe that's a good thing to ask for, but we don't want to be the blocker or always be in the way, right? So things could land.
Yes.
But if we're the blocker for getting out of experimental, I don't think that's as bad.
Right. Yeah. No, I like the idea of at least having to gate it. It gives it a little time to. Like it lets people play around with it a little bit more in terms of what they want to try and introduce.
Yeah.
But it won't necessarily bind us to supporting it in perpetuity.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's we should make that proposal. Now we'll have to get feedback from the rest of the team in the TSC, but it seems like a good idea to me for sure.
Yeah. I'm taking notes for Hitesh as well,
Good.
and I'll sync up with him later today about the discussion, and we'll work on formalizing this a little more and getting it into the issue.
Sounds good.
So what's the process? What do you want to do after we agree on this?
Are you talking to me? Or...
Michael.
Okay.
Well, I guess it's like get it documented in that issue, and then basically at CC the TSC. Well, at CC all the collaborators to say this is our this is our proposal for how we want to manage the new APIs going into N-API.
Okay, and then kind of publish it somewhere, or?
Yeah, I think it would be a PR. Once we agree to it, actually, it might be a PR into Node itself. Maybe I'd say let's get it into the issue. Let's notify everybody to get feedback to see if if we get silence, fine. If we get a whole bunch of comments, we'll iterate. Once we're ready, we'll PR it into Node somewhere. I'd have to look to see.
Yeah, maybe in like the contribution guide or the collaborator guide or somewhere, and in there might make sense.
Yeah, we'll find the right. Maybe it's a separate doc, but referenced in the collaborator guide or whatever, but something that basically says, at least something in the collaborator guide that kind of says it goes under the experimental group, because people who are reviewing need to know that. And we'll PR that in, so it's just part of the common knowledge.
Cool. Yeah, no, sounds like good progress.
Yep. But yeah, and I think adding please tag things these ways and that experimental concept is definitely good. And then having this list that says, you have to have the test cases. There should be at least one sample test case per interesting use of the API. Okay.
Do you want documentation?
Yeah, definitely doc. I mean, that's almost pretty much assumed, right? Like.
Yeah.
But it doesn't hurt to say it again. Anything you add in the Node core should have doc. It should have a test, but it really doesn't hurt to say. So now I would almost just say there must be at least one test.
Okay.
The sample part, I don't know what a sample would be. What I would say is we could add. You should consider adding. If it's new enough or different enough consider adding an entry in the Node add-on examples.
Right. Yeah, I think the spirit of this was basically just if there's the test case should try and cover all interesting uses of it rather than just, checking off the box of sure. I called it one way. I think that was all I was trying to get at, but.
Yeah. So I would remove sample from there, but I think another one wouldn't be bad would be a reminder that, hey, if it's not necessarily obvious, adding something to the Node add-on examples makes sense.
Yeah.
And then the other thing probably is it needs an issue opened in Node add-on API.
Right.
Because really we want to, if you add it to core, we probably want to get into Node add-on API as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll get caught up, and then that'll be
correct me if I'm wrong, but we can't really ask for like production usage here, right? Like, because for an API itself, we had to present like production usage, but I don't think we can ask for the same of new APIs, right? Or can we?
I don't think we can. I think maybe some wording in there about, at the front that says, we really want to keep the set of APIs to the smallest required set. And so, I don't think we can require production usage, but I think we could, we could basically try and capture in words like, this really needs to be there, not just something that seems nice.
Yes, clearly. Yeah, and I mean, presumably people will come forward with these requests, based on some real need that they've encountered in their day-to-day work.
So maybe that kind of wording, I think maybe we could put in there.
Right. Yep.
Basically, there should be a demonstrated use case and need for it being added.
Exactly.
Not a, I imagine this might be useful kind of thing. And
yeah, I agree.
Now, obviously, there'll be exceptions, but I think that's the starting point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the production use requirement for us was because it was such a sweeping, large surface area change that we were doing. That probably prompted the production use.
Because I'm thinking we might be able to get substantial usage information. Even so, if we have a serious contender for a new API backed, like, I don't know, by Netflix or something, then they can say, look, we built this, we forked Node, we tested it on like, I don't know, on like 0.5% of our capability, and it worked, and that's production usage, but it's kind of experimental, and then we can like just tip our hat and say, of course, but that's perhaps an extreme example, but even something less than that, where they just put it through the CI for their own shop, and they showed that it made things possible. We could accept that kind of anecdotal evidence as well, right?
That's sort of where I was getting at it, in terms of the, it needs to be, you need to demonstrate that it's a real need. And
so are you
there's lots of different ways to do that, right?
Gabriel, are you suggesting the demonstrated need should be publicly available, or
No. I mean, it should be credible, is what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Like, and the thing is, like, we're helping them out by publishing as experimental, right? Like, if we publish with this flag, then we'll make it easy for them to use their existing deployment pipeline for using a published version. All they need to do is add N-API experimental to their flags, and then yes, that's a development step on their part, but they want this, right? So they add this step, they run it through their pipeline with a published version of Node because it's experimental, and then we're like, okay, this can come out of experimental because you ran it and it actually helped you.
Yeah, I mean, I think doing that then says it's easy. Compared to the bar that's set in the regular project, I think that would be potentially a bit of a tough sell for a total requirement.
Yeah, no, not. I'm not suggesting that we make this a hard requirement, but it would support the case for it having seen some real world usage, even experimentally, right? And so the thing is, like, while it's experimental, we can break it, right? But after that, we cannot. So we need to know that it works for at least somebody,
Yep. Okay, so let's, I guess, Kyle, you'll pass that back to Hitesh, and he can come up with some words, and we can iterate on
And
that.
I assume this is being recorded too, so I can always point him back to the video.
Yeah.
Yes,
So,
how convenient.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm taking the notes anyway, and I'll point him at the video if he wants to, to see.
Good.
But I think this is good progress, and I don't see anything blocking. Then just a little bit of work to do.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to the. If I can find it. Oh, maybe I'll just have to open it again. Choose milestones, share. I just shared the right one. Okay. Great. So we're talking that SQLite pipes. So SQLite N-API port. Anisha, just give an update on that. Give us an update on that one.
So the port itself is working, but there's 2 failing test cases. And the reason for that is we don't have a way to check whether a JavaScript object is a date or a regular expression. So I'm working on making a pull request to add that, similarly to how we check whether a JavaScript object is a promise.
Can you not use N-API instance of, retrieve the date class off the global object, similar with the regex class, and then just use N-API instance of?
The thing is that, like, there's a number of, and this is a good question, a good discussion to have. There's a number of sort of standard types, in the language. So, date, for example, and regex are both standard objects.
Okay.
And so V8 provides a helper to say, just, is it this thing?
Okay.
And that's why my first thought was, well, yeah, for those two, we should probably just add them.
Yeah,
Okay.
my worry though is like how far down the rabbit hole do we go? Map set, week set. Like it's kind of a slippery slope is my only
So how far does how far does V8 and Chakra Core go on that front? Like that's at
so
least
Chakra Core doesn't really. We do intrinsic types, and then we kind of leave it to you to figure it out from there. We actually don't even have a good instance of, but that's more of a gap than we don't have a good native API for instance of. So that's a gap that we would almost certainly we could fix that, but I know in the past we've been apprehensive about adding a new public API for every single, are you this, are you that, are you the other thing? And so I know there would be a little bit of pushback on the Chakra Core API front to expose those. We could always do it in N-API, of course, if we add instance of, it could be instance of under the hood. Yeah. But from the same token, it's is that going to be too much API surface bloat to manage?
I guess so that's a very good discussion as the other, even in the short term. So basically from the global object, you can get the date constructor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
so maybe
get the global, you get the date property basically.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's the same for regex?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So maybe if you guys, Anisha, maybe it makes sense to implement it in terms of that as the short term, let's get SQLite working, because otherwise the other one's going to require backports and everything.
Yeah.
The one caveat to that to call out is you have to make sure that you get it off the global for the right context. I'm not actually sure how multi-context N-API can even be, but I did run into an issue recently with Node Chakra Core where we were using instance of, but the promise came from another context.
Oh.
And so in theory, it should be related to the env.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you'll use that env to do. Okay. So I think it's worth implementing this using that because it's more tactical. I think separately we will have to figure out what makes sense because we have some instance ofs, and where do we sort of cut off the line?
And then there's the whole performance question. If you're doing this in a tight loop for whatever very good reason, then you may want to implement that API.
Right. I just didn't know that it was that easy to do, so that's why I didn't suggest it. But I think that we should do that to start with, and then. I mean, we have a similar request for like, now those may be slightly different, is like the int32s.
Oh, yeah.
So it's kind of the same thing, except in that case, like int32 isn't standardized. So I was much less favorable.
Exactly.
Just as a starting point. Like, at least if it's one of the standard object types, you're like, okay, you know, we've done it for some. If it's not one of the standard object types, then it's like some engines may just not be able to tell, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. And so the N32 one was like an is N32 N-API call. Is that the?
Yeah. Just it was the same kind of instance of just saying, well, I want to know, you know, not just that it's a number, but that it's a particular type of number.
Yeah, I mean that's a little bit of that's definitely a trickier one because I don't think any engine actually truly like they always are storing numbers. I mean, big ints are a different thing. I know that like you can still usually if you can get the double and then interrogate the double to figure out whether it is an int and then whether it's in 32 bits. So it's one of those things where like a Node add-on API could maybe do like an implementation if we really thought it was a thing that would be useful. But I'm apprehensive to going back to the like, is it required to do the thing or is it convenient? And then there's a spectrum there where we need to figure out what makes sense.
One and the and putting it maybe in Node add-on or having some instructions on how to do it maybe is the starting point.
Right. True. Yeah. If we have these things, maybe like is ABI stable node a good place to have like meta discussions about it, or do it just right in the node?
I think ABI stable node is good, although I think some of those meta ones maybe we want to pull into the larger audience and not.
Right. True. Yeah.
I'd kind of be like, it's sometimes worth us discussing a little bit and then throwing it out into the bigger one too.
Because it'd be interesting to get other people's opinions on those sorts of things. There's a lot of spectrum in JavaScript between JavaScript and NAN and the V8 APIs and the N-API. There's a whole spectrum there, and people have fallen in different areas of it.
Right. So okay, so yeah, Anisha, that I think from this perspective, let's see if we can just implement it without adding anything.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry for sending you on that sort of wild goose chase for a little while, but.
That's okay.
And then we may have to, I think we're pretty much out of time, unfortunately, today, but we should schedule some time to talk about the int32 side of things.
Okay.
Investigate use. So I'm just going to quickly, actually at this point, I'm going to say, is there anything else that we really need to touch on? Because we are out of time.
No, I got to work on my version PR a little more anyway, just to tighten it up, and I'll try and see about incorporating an experimental.
Yeah, that sounds good.
That'd be awesome.
Okay, cool.
Documentation. I know a bunch of people have posted documentation things. Thanks very much. I'm trying to I've commented on a few. I see other people have commented on, so let's just keep some focus on that, but I don't think we have time to dive into it. The one last thing I'll mention is I won't be able to make it next week. Actually, or the week after. So I'd say fall back to the Hangout in terms of doing the meeting, and I'll try and read up on what comes out of those two. But I'm at it's a collaborator summit 2 weeks from now, and I'm at a conference next week. So.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. I'll talk to you guys later.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.